Hey guys, I'm back with another tutorial today. Um, Last night on my Instagram, I posted this picture, and a lot of you guys in the comments said you'd like a shoe tutorial, so I'm gonna make one for you right now. I'll just put the reference picture I'm using up on the screen. It is a little bit blurry, but that's all right. We'll make it work, and I'll also put it on my Pinterest board, my Pinterest board that has my reference pictures in it. So I'll put that in the description of the video. All right. So I am going to show you guys which materials I'll be using. So I'll just be using this Staedtler HB pencil. I prefer it when they're like a little bit blunt. It makes it easy to sketch with. My Pentel Oran 0.2 millimeter, my Pentel Graph Gear 1000 0.3, and then I didn't even end up using this 0.5, so don't worry about that. I am doing a voiceover again. I tried to film this with me talking in real time while I was filming this, and it didn't turn out well. So, yeah. All right, so let's get started. So, I'm gonna start out with my slightly blunt pencil, and I'm just going to sketch really rough sort of shape of the shoe. I find it really hard to visualize when I've got like a blank piece of paper. I find it hard to visualize like how big something's going to be or where it's going to be on the paper or how it's going to look or just whatever. So I like to just at least put something down on the paper. It doesn't have to be perfect or whatever, just a rough shape and size of what you're about to draw. It just helps me a lot. So then at least I can actually see something on the paper and I can go off that um, and work on it from there. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I'll just speed it up a little bit while I finish the other boot. All right, so now I'm grabbing my 0.3 millimeter and I'm pretty much just going to, based off my guideline, I'm going to use that to help me build, just define it and build more of the final shape of what it's going to look like. So darkening my lines, and I'm adding, I like to add like texture, like a few on down the back of the boot there's like a few creases, so I add those in there. And I'm just really concentrating on the shape and trying to get it right, because I find, especially with shoes or feet, um, if even just one little line or anything is angled the wrong way, it can just throw the whole thing off. So, um, yeah, I do struggle with shoes sometimes. But anyway, here I'm just explaining how most shoes have the little um, that little indent where the arch of the foot goes. So I just added that in there, and I'm just sketching the sole of the boot here. And I was pretty happy with the shape of this boot. I didn't have too much trouble with it. Had a little bit of trouble with the other boot, just because his foot is on an angle and the bottom of his boot is showing. So then the angles start getting a little bit funky and just got a little difficult, but that's all right. You will see. I just had to erase quite a few times, and I eventually got it um, looking all right, I think. But when that happens, you just have to sort of look at your reference picture, break it down in your mind, and just think of simple shapes and try not to draw it all at once. Just go step by step. So I'll just speed up the rest of this boot, and then I'll just quickly sketch the his jeans, which isn't much because not much of them are showing. It's pretty straightforward. Um, But with clothing, I will make a separate video eventually on clothing, but I think it's important to make it look like it's sort of sitting on top of the skin. So adding those little sort of puffy areas and wrinkles and folds and things like that. So I like to make my when I draw clothes, just make it quite textured. But I will make a video on that eventually as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm just using my pencil eraser, which is the Tombow Mono Zero eraser in the round shape, and I'm just going around the edge of my lines and cleaning up that initial sketch that I made, those guidelines in the very beginning. So I'm just going really close to my sketch and um, erasing all those lines that don't need to be there and leaving behind um, the main sketch. So this part's pretty satisfying as well. I like it. And now I'm just going in with my kneadable eraser. I didn't really need to do this, but I wanted to show it anyway. I'm just going over my sketch just with dabbing motions. It pretty much just turns down the opacity uh, of the sketch so that do you can really define your lines and make your final lines on top, but you're not completely erasing your sketch underneath, so you know where you're going. Um, but it just makes it a lot lighter so that it doesn't show through as much. And it's pretty much like with digital art, if you're when you make your sketch layer and then you want to do like a final lines layer on top, you turn down the opacity of your initial sketch layer and then you can do your final lines over the top of that. So that's kind of how I use my kneadable erasers sometimes. So now I'm going in with kind of the final shape. So I'm paying more attention to detail here because this is mostly what it will look like in the end, the shape of the boot anyway. But yeah, I really like this step. I just really like using bold, clean lines. So this is satisfying for me. I also prefer to use straight lines. I like sharp edges. I don't really use a lot of smooth curves unless it's like maybe on a face or something. But yeah, I just like the way this looks, especially on the boots. So now I'll just finish off this one and then I'll get on to detailing, which mm, it's kind of trial and error and you'll improve on it as you practice. It's a little hard to explain, but um, you just need to take it slow, especially with shoes. Sometimes there can be a lot going on if they're really detailed anyway. But try your best to break it apart. So when I start in a second, which is now, I think I start on the sole first. So just to get that out of the way. And then obviously shoes have different parts to them. So there's the shoe, just overall shoe, and then you've got the sole and the laces and the little eyelets which the laces go into, and then you've got the tongue. So just work on each part of the shoe at a time and break it down that way. So now I'll just finish off the details. This is, I'm not completely finishing each detail. I'm sort of just marking them out at this point. And I actually got something wrong as well because I correct it later, but in case you're following along here, don't draw the laces down the boot because they don't actually have laces in this specific reference picture. There's not laces all the way down the boot. There's actually a zip, and I just wasn't looking hard enough. So yeah, this is where I had a little bit of trouble on this underside of the shoe here. And you'll see I just sort of keep going back in there and erasing it, drawing it again, and erasing it and drawing it again. But That's completely fine. Just do it as many times as you have to. And also, I mention in the, for some reason, the boot in the background of the picture, I can see more details in it. Um, so if you've got a reference picture and say you're drawing shoes and one of the shoes you can't completely see the details, um, look at the other one. You might be able to see something else, and then you can just draw it on the other shoe because they're identical. So that helped me out a lot in this case. So now I was pretty happy with the underside of this shoe. I think it looks all right, and it's just when something's on an angle or an awkward angle like that, it's just trying to get it to come across like that in the drawing can be a little bit tough. But anyway, I'm going on to shading the jeans now. I just like using downward strokes with my 0.3 millimeter. It's quite satisfying. And now I'm just going in with some darker, I'm going over the top and doing the same technique with some downward strokes just to give it some dimension and make some areas darker than others. And I'm also adding in some creases here. I'm not being too particular about it. I'm just kind of being messy because that's the look I like to go for. And after this, I'll be doing sort of the final details with my 0.2 millimeter. And the Pentel Oren 0.2 millimeter is my must-have pencil. It's my go-to, especially for small details. And if you like to draw on a small scale, my drawings have gotten slightly bigger over time, but I think they're still quite small. Really good if you like to draw on a small scale. So here I am using it right now. This is kind of the last step. Well, the last step goes for quite a while because I just spend a lot of time sort of finishing everything off and defining all my lines. Um, but basically, what I'm doing here is when there's a lot of details going on in something, whether it be like a face or clothes or shoes or whatever it is, um, some things can get sort of uh, drowned in all the lines and it can start looking a bit muddy. So in this step, I like to get my zero point 0.2 because it's super thin and you can get really precise lines. And I like to just make certain things stand out, things that might get a little bit lost. So, for example, like the laces, just going over them, making the lines really sharp and really dark, just so you definitely can tell those are shoelaces and not just random scribbly lines. So I'm going to continue to do that all over, just further defining everything. I find this so satisfying to watch. I just really love uh, clean lines. And here is the moment where I begin to realize what the boot actually looks like and what's going on with the shoelaces. So it's got these shoelace details on the eyelets here. They're not actually laces that are holding the shoe together. There's a zip. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just erasing those laces and I'm going to draw in the zip. And I also want to mention, like right here with the zip, obviously it's not going to be a completely straight line because the shoe has folds and wrinkles in it. So make it like a little bit jagged just to suggest that it's folding on itself a little bit. So I'm just going to finish those details on both shoes now. And I added like a few little crease details and a bit of shading as well. I'm in a constant battle between whether I should leave things unshaded, like just plain black and white, or if I should shade things. Because I really like the clean look of just having um, bold lines on white paper with not much shading at all. But yeah, I don't know. These boots are black, so I decided to add a little bit of shading. And especially under this boot that's behind here, because there's a lot of shadows being cast underneath the sole. And now it's time for a few little details with my white gel pen, which is the Jelly Roll in size 08. And I'm just using that, being very careful just to go inside the shoelaces here to give them a little bit of highlight and make them stand out a little bit more. And also this one shoelace that I'm working on now, I forgot about it and it did end up getting lost in all of the lines a little bit. So I'm just making that one stand out. And also under the shoe here where these little indents are, I'm just putting a little bit of white um, to give them a little bit of dimension and make those little the little stompy bits at the bottom of the boots. I don't really know how to explain them. Make those stand out a little bit more as well. And that's pretty much it. For the rest of the video, I'm just going over my lines again with my 0.2 millimeter. I do this a lot. I just really like to make the lines bold and clean, and I just darken them up quite a bit. So that's just what I'm doing right here. And that's the final step. So yeah, I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I hope you like this video. I will continue to make more. You can leave suggestions down below on what I should make next, whether it's like an idol or like a portrait or clothing or hands or whatever. I'm happy to make videos on all that stuff. So yeah, just let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.